episode is sponsored by Teamhood, a modern project management system.
Charles, do I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Charles-Louis.
Charles-Louis,
Yeah.
okay.
Charles-Louis.
Nice to have you here on the Agile couch or on the Agile sofa. That's who we are on the Agile sofas. It's not yet the sofa, but it's the best we could have today.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to have you here. I've been just in your workshop session that happened just before the lunch. It was a really amazing session, and your storytelling skills as well as visual facilitation skills are just fantastic, and everyone would love to have that. Personally, I really would like to have these visual drawing skills because I'm a fan of it. Once I've started practicing, I understood it's really nice. But yeah, great job. And I want to check with you a bit about the session that we just had.
Okay.
So you've been giving some examples of how using a fairy tales might be useful in the work environment.
Yep.
Could you give some examples of such situations for our listeners so we could better understand how would you use it or how they could use it?
Yeah, and I will give some examples, but maybe the first thing, and maybe I'll ask you also a question, because when we talk about fairy tales, usually, my first reaction when I talk about fairy tales, I think about like children and like imagination and stuff like that. And when we talk about work, more of when I speak about work with friends or with colleagues, the conversation doesn't have the same kind of vibe. Or it's not like much imagination or creativity. Yeah, sometimes you have the possibility. So maybe a question like for you is, when you hear fairy tales and work, what's your kind of first kind of thought? Because the tone of the workshop was fairy tales at work. Why not?
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, personally, I think it's really fun. Depends on the situation, of course. But it helps to smoothen out the big drama sometimes. Sometimes it helps to put ourselves into the better mood and gives good analogies, metaphors about the things that have happened or we want to see that supposed to happen.
Yeah.
It's really like nice.
Yeah, and I like the examples that you bring, because indeed, like sometimes when situations happen at work, we could be uncomfortable with bringing up the topic. For instance, let's say that for 3 days in a row, like we're colleagues, we're sitting together, but you always bring all your stuff, and for 3 days of your row, half of your stuff was on my part of the desk, because now we're
like right now.
Like, yeah, exactly. So like I could be like, okay, I'm pissed at that, but I'm a nice person, so I will not tell Simas. But while I'm still thinking that, it's like, and then at some point I'll say, Simas, I'm fed up. Just get your stupid stuff I could just explode. And this is the thing. Sometimes we keep things in ourselves because we think it's not appropriate to talk about it in work. And I've noticed that when we use stories, not for the stories themselves, although, but stories as a placeholder for a conversation, it's much easier to talk about, okay, this is how I relate to this, how do you relate to this? And then we can build a shared understanding and say, okay, and how does this relate now to our usage of office space? And maybe you could tell me, well, I see the office space as a great playground, and so like, in a playground, it's normal that you like leave stuff all the place because it's a thing, and maybe I see it more like a library. Well, great, and then like, how can we bridge these stories together? And using fairy tales is, especially when we are not used to talk about difficult stuff, is a great starting point. Yeah. Because you don't need much preparation. You could just take any book, like this one is from Hans Christian Andersen. Like Danish author, wrote like tons of novels, mainly folk and fairy tales, but the idea is that, and it might sound weird, but the story is not the point. What I mean by that, and we did it in the workshop, is like we start with the story, and then what happened next
was the conversation within the people that heard the story, how they do interpret, how they do relate with their current challenges, surroundings, and etc.
Yeah, and so this is like telling the story is very easy because like everybody like gets into listen to a nice story and gets very comfortable. And then, okay, how do you relate that? Then it becomes much easier. So actually the barrier is much easier than to speak, okay, shall we, Simas, sort your desk thing out for yourself because you're grown adults. And then we'll be like, yeah, but it's been treated and yeah. So stories is, I like this term of placeholder. Like you put it there and then people can like color it or can like interpret it any way they want. But they will always do it they will always find links.
Depending on their situation and what they have to inside. And as I mentioned, it probably helps to smoothen things out if it's very edgy, like a topic, as you mentioned, for example, with the table and all the things around, to not insult you, we could. Because I'm a nice person, right?
I'm not gonna say bad things to you. And actually, look, like these stories, even as a facilitator, when you're starting out as a facilitator, you might think, okay, like I have this experience as a facilitator, or I have zero experience as a facilitator. How do I start? Oh, I have all these books on facilitation tips and tricks, but what we saw earlier, like we can start with just 5 steps. Just pick a story, gather a group, and then just tell the story, and then let the people debrief together.
So that's the technique that you would be suggesting to use. Pick a story, tell the story, gather the group to debrief, and share the learnings afterwards.
Exactly.
Look, I would like to hear as well a bit of your perspective on visual facilitation, as you're so-called professional or god. I'm just joking, of a visual facilitation. I would like to understand how that might be helpful and useful, for everyone around. I mean, I do understand it's very helpful for Scrum Masters, like Agile coaches, product owners. But how is that helping for everybody, and what?
That's a great question, Simas, because also like recently, thanks to the pandemic and so on. But usually, I thought this is the only thing that works in person. But I've also been teaching because I'm a teacher for Bikablo, which is the German organization that teaches visual facilitation. But I've been moving my stuff online, and in April this year, I've had somebody join a group from Niger in Africa, and this person works with young people who were previously in terrorist groups. So these people have seen violence, like it's like not office drama, but this like they've seen blood and thing. And he works with these, giving them another chance, and also doing workshops with them. And he says using the visuals really helps. Again, also like we said for the story, it helps like smoothing down the conversations, and also like in the stories about the desk thing, and you maybe seeing it like a playground, and me like a library. Well, at least if we already make it visible, it's useful. And so to me, visualization is not as much about drawing or art. It's more about like creating our understanding, and drawings being imperfect. So sometimes with work we think if something is confusing or too vague, then I will explain with even more words. But what happens
then? That doesn't help at all.
No, especially like here we're talking in English, but it's not my main language, it's not your first language, so like we might be, and this is where maybe having a word or having a metaphor, for instance, and again this is like the classical example that you don't need to be able to draw, because for instance if you use all the letters from the word Uzmo, okay, like you draw a big a big O, then a small U underneath. Okay, and then I would take the Z, I would put it here, and then the M that I would put there. What do I have?
I've seen that.
Suddenly, this can be an idea.
Yeah.
But I don't need to be able to draw. But the interesting thing comes when we build a shared understanding. For instance, a couple of years ago, I was teaching visual facilitation in Africa, in Benin, to people who were in education.
Okay.
And then I said, okay, we had already 1 day of training, and now let's just I'll say a word and then we draw something. So the word that I chose was education. And so I decided to draw this like plant coming out of, the seed.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I wrote here education. It's a bit small. And then when I showed the drawing to everyone, they said, "We don't get your drawing, Charles-Louis. Sorry, we don't get it." And I was like, okay, but these are people who work in education. So, but then I added more words actually. So like I was saying, I see education as like nurturing the soil so that learning can happen and that like children can like grow out of that, which is like my view on education. No, sorry, we don't get it. So like adding more words didn't help. So what I did then, I asked them, hey, can you show me your drawings? But what they had drawn were schools, teachers, and stands where teachers stand in order to teach children. And so I understood that even though we were using the same word, it's lucky that in French education is also éducation, so but we're using the same word, but we talked about different concepts. And that afterwards, like we had a great conversation of actually they see education as the teacher having all the knowledge, and their role is really to transmit the knowledge to the other children.
Yeah.
It's a totally different view of education than mine. But then the conversation that happened afterwards, like, hey, do you see when we have organizations who come like to Africa for education and they give money for education, like in Europe they say, oh yes, we'll do a program in Benin and we'll give you money for education, and in Benin they'll say great, happy, but then the implementation starts.
Yeah.
And then the people from Belgium say, we gave you money, we want like you to focus on this, like without using this but using the word. Yeah, you need to like teach your teachers and find other ways to facilitate learning, and they're like, we need more buildings. And so a misunderstanding starts. And so we had a great conversation of how these drawings actually help to clear out, to show.
How do we understand different things? As what I see doesn't mean that you see the same. And once we explain with the words, as that it even might add more confusion rather than that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. Although I would add one more thing actually to the visual facilitation. What you didn't mention, but I'm sure that you're mentioning that in your classes that you're running, that definitely drawing visually the information that someone is conveying gives a much better understanding in your brains to sit and to maintain the memory of what was discussed. So now I just gave a few examples of the education word, but I'm sure that I'll remember this picture for I don't know how long, even if I don't need that, but I'll clearly map it that there is a seed, there is a plant growing, and it's about education.
Yeah.
So we just discussed and you've drawn it.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that, Simas, because this is actually something which is called dual coding theory. Some people say that they are visual learners or auditory learners and so on, but this thing like is a bit like this is not like true. Or like this has not been validated, the fact that they are visual learners or not. Like for instance, if you want to learn geography and the rivers of Lithuania, they would say, yeah, but I'm not a visual learner, I cannot. So it's like nothing to do. You learn geography by looking at maps. There's it's easier that way. So, but what you talked about is actually the fact of having a word with the drawing. Mapping it, this is the dual coding, and this increases the retention.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So it's combination of both that.
I can second that because that is the technique I'm using at my work, and it definitely works great for people to remember. We talked, for example, about the technical depth, and there is a very simple drawing you can draw. There's a car with square wheels.
Yeah.
And you show that the square wheels is a technical depth.
Yeah.
And everyone will now remember that car with the square wheels is a technical depth, and it will sit in their mind not only by the drawing but that that's the problem, the challenge we have discussed, and we have it.
Yeah.
We want to overcome it. How to make the round
Yeah.
wheels instead.
Yeah, exactly. And this kind of also brings us back to like actually with this car, with the square wheels, we could also tell, you know, what's the impact of that.
Yeah.
And then we could start telling stories and so on. And so to me, all these devices are very useful when working with groups, when facilitating. And it's not like you only need to do visual facilitation all the time, or you only need to do storytelling. I think as a facilitator, you really need like different skills in order to adapt live to your audience.
So visual facilitation is being able to use the skills that you learn or that you grow within the facilitation during live show, live event or whatever.
And like there's different ways of doing it. Some people like to be the people visually capturing a talk. For instance, this morning Jürgen Appelo was speaking about his unfixed model. We could have imagined that somebody would be there to kind of capture the main ideas of his talk. Others, like me, I usually use it as a device for my workshops. You know, like I have like welcome poster, instruction posters for some activities, and it kind of gives an idea for where to go. But other people like, you know, but depending on how you use it, again, it's not the tool that's important. And it might sound a bit strange because I talk about storytelling, I talk about these visuals, but it's really, what's most important is that the group goes where we need, that the group goes where it needs to be,
go,
or to go,
Exactly.
That is the key thing.
The other example, I've seen visual skills used for sketchnoting, like as you mentioned, while Jürgen was talking, someone would be drawing what he was talking. It might be a very nice meeting summary.
Yeah.
And if even everybody would see it at the same time while someone would be speaking, it would be much more aligned what we are talking about. Yeah. So that's as well another powerful technique probably that could be used at work.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe also, I mean, I'll come back because actually, you know, just yesterday and the day before, I was running the first ever Bikablo visual facilitation training in Lithuania. It's really great. And we're thinking to organize the next session. There's no date yet, but I will come. I will also run a workshop together with Agile Coach Lithuania on December the 8th. It will either be online or in person. We don't know yet. But this will be really about like the facilitation skills, about how do you like, if you have, as a facilitator, usually if you run a workshop, it's not just to entertain people. It's not at all. I mean, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to reach a goal. But it's how can we flexibly adapt the facilitation on the fly so that we still work on our goal. So this will be on December the 8th. Okay. Either here in the lovely city of Vilnius or from the comfort of maybe the sofa or yeah. Yeah, so that's an invitation for listeners that if you're interested in Bikablo course, probably you might get in touch with Charles-Louis or with me. Yeah, to get more clarification what is happening. Should be around December. So no, December will be the Dancing Like a Facilitator. Yeah. There will be another Bikablo course, but this will be in 2023. We haven't decided the date yet. So that will be... but definitely if you want some tips about visual facilitation and storytelling facilitation techniques, I'm sure that Charles-Louis is open for giving some tips and tricks. Yeah, and I'm easily findable on LinkedIn, so... I've tried that. Very nice to chat with you, and thanks for sharing your things. Maybe just the last thing, I see you have on the table very nice thingy. I'm not sure what it is. If you could show what it is for the audience. This is the facilitator's best friend, especially like when I work with large groups and I have like group discussion and they say, okay, you speak for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes. At the end of the timing, what I do is I take this. Okay, you know, maybe this is a cultural thing in Belgium. We don't really do that. No, actually, I just do this. And I just love the sound. I got this from Sivasalam Tyagarajan, so Tyagi, who's one of my mentors on the like flexible facilitation and playful facilitation. And I just love the sound so much. So when I do this, people are not angry at me for stopping the conversation. They just laugh or whatever, and so it keeps the atmosphere playful.
Very nice, fantastic.
Yeah.
So to learn more about such tricks and more, you can get in touch with Charles-Louis.
Yep.
Or meet at December workshop.
Yep.
Or even later for Bikablo course, drawing, sketching,
Yep.
and using
Exactly.
all the art things.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Simas,
Thank you
for the
very much.
invitation.
Nice chat. Happy to chat with you as always, and see you next time.
Yeah. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.